This is the Rebel Call Channel. Welcome to today's show. There are multiple stories coming out of Australia about mass casualty events. But unlike America, what they're trying to do in Australia right now is de-arm civilians from actually owning and having the right to obtain a knife. That's right, a knife. There are multiple events, including a man who went into a mall and stabbed 6 people. You've probably seen the story of the supposed stabbing at a church where a man ran up and stabbed a priest while he was giving a sermon at a church. And of course, this also plays into the Muslim-Christian divide that they are building, which is part of the World War III deception, part of the blueprint that Albert Pike wrote for how World War III needs to play out. But let's focus our attention on the stories about these knife events, because Australia is a country that has given up its right to bear arms. And it wasn't enough, and it's not enough, because this is what eventually is happening around the world. It's guns, then knives, then literally anything you could own that could hurt someone else. And people out there are so caught up in these stories and so fearful to go to these public places like a mall that they go along with this and don't understand what manipulation is. When eventually we'll have nothing, and literally the government will have every weapon imaginable. They'll have every knife. You wouldn't even be able to defend. You wouldn't even be able to cut your own food with a knife in the future. And they'll tell you, well, you don't need to cut your food with a knife because you're not eating meat anyway. We'll cut it for you and we'll ship it to you with an Amazon delivery truck or an Uber Eats truck. You don't have to worry about any of that stuff. We'll cut your prison food for you. And this is what happens when civilians give up their rights. The government continues to get more aggressive, more obsessive. And for anyone out there that thinks that we don't cause the governments or the global government to be fearful, think again. They're fearful of us because there's more of us than them, which is why they're upping the stakes. This is why they're moving so heavily and pushing so hard to remove everything they possibly can, so the civilians suddenly, when they do wake up, will look around and go, well, we don't even have a knife. Well, could we make a knife? Well, we're too dumb to even make a knife. We're screwed because we've given up all of our rights to a tyrannical government, a global government, because we've all been fearful that if we go to the mall, somebody's going to run after us and stab us, which is why in America, people need to stand their ground about the right to bear arms. These people are fearful because, again, if you're not, because people out there go, hey, the government's going to wipe us out if they want to wipe us out. Well, I'll put it to you this way. In any type of fight and any type of warfare, numbers always win. Okay, you could be a master in jiu-jitsu, you can be, 7 feet tall, and you can get into a fight with somebody who's 5 foot, okay? And the odds are you're probably 99% gonna beat them, right? But if that person who's 5 feet brings 20 people to the playground with them versus this one guy, even as much as maybe he'll knock out 5 of them, 10 of them at once, the numbers will always win. Numbers is the key to warfare, and there's way more of us than there are of them, and they need to obtain everything they possibly can. So all these stories have come out of Australia about knife attacks, and this is, again, is problem, reaction, solution, because they're trying to pass this bill at the same time that all these knife attacks are happening, where they're going to make it, if you're caught out in public with a knife, or if you're a shop and you sell a knife to a minor, et cetera, you will be in prison. Look at this in Australia.
Well, just a week after a teenage boy is accused of stabbing an Ipswich grandmother to death, legislation is being brought forward and new laws will be considered to beef up our state's fight against knife crime. But the opposition has slammed the lack of detail and potential impact of the new measures.
Ipswich grandmother Vilene White was stabbed to death with a knife. Now the government wants to make it harder for children to get them, bringing forward laws to ban sales of knives to juveniles.
If we can stop the sale of a weapon to a young person, then we will have prevented a crime.
Police Commissioner Katarina Carroll addressed Cabinet, also asking for the government to expand wanding powers, allowing police to search for knives at locations like shopping centres, and also for changes to make it easier for youth criminals to be fitted with GPS trackers, after only 33 were used in the last 3 years.
What we do want to look at is the criteria and whether that can be extended.
And ultimately, where the law needs to be changed, we will take that to the Parliament and there will be a full and thorough committee scrutiny.
Stephen Miles has been hiding under a rock for 6 days. I would have thought he would have come up today with concrete, solid proposals and plans to legislate, and he hasn't.
The one concrete change announced today, the maximum offence for possessing a knife in a public place increasing from 12 to 18 months.
Of course, it was 33. We saw the 33s plastered all over that clip. 33 trackers fitted in 3 years. But this has nothing to do with protecting civilians. Clearly, what we're seeing around the earth right now is civilians are under attack from the government. The government is allowing criminals to run amok. They're letting people out of prison. They're actually paying people to commit these crimes, like punching someone in the face in these cities, or these stabbings that are going on over in Australia, or the false flag events here in America. This is all done by design to make you want these enforcements so you feel like the government is here to protect you. But in reality, what they're trying to do is completely de-arm you. And for people out there, again, if your mindset is, well, what does it matter? If you follow the mindset of Joe Biden and these guys where they go, they can have whatever they want. We have planes and we have jets. They know that numbers are all that matters, which is why they're so hell-bent on doing this. And Australia is a perfect example for people in America to look at. No matter what your stance is as a Christian on guns, okay? Whatever your stance is, I'm not somebody who's like running around with, I'm not the kind of person who loves, owning guns, etc. Thinks it's a wonderful thing. They're for protection. Everybody should have a gun to protect themselves because of what the government's doing. When you start seeing the government act the way that it's acting, it should make you want to bear arms. And again, you might say, well, I'll own one, but I'll never use one, all these types of things. The more we give them rights, the more eventually they'll be at your front door. And when they're at your front door and they know that everybody's unarmed, they'll be coming into your home and you'll say to yourself, I wish I was armed. We should not have given up our rights. So it's not about you personally, what your take is, if you want to own a weapon or anything like that to protect yourself or protect your property. It's about having this in circulation and removing our rights, because there are civilians who are arming themselves to protect themselves from a tyrannical government. They're not arming themselves because they want to go to the grocery store and go to jail for life or get the death penalty because suddenly they don't like the way somebody's dressed. These are the things that they plant in people's minds, obviously, to bring about what they want. Problem, reaction, solution. So in Australia, a country that already had given up its gun rights, now they're in countries like Australia trying to remove the right to own a knife. Do you know how insane that is? Now, they already have strict knife rules in Australia, but they're trying to make it stricter and stricter. And suddenly you're at home and you're using a plastic knife to cut your steak. Well, you won't have a steak, of course, because they don't want you to have that either. To cut your cockroach, right? You'll be using a plastic knife and you'll go, this is difficult. This isn't easy. Why do I only have a plastic knife? Because you've given up your rights. And then the plastic knife will be too dangerous as well. And the government will say, we'll cut your prison food for you and we'll ship it to your house pre-cut. So don't worry about it. So they've been talking for months about a crackdown on public knife possession. What will happen to you if you're caught with a knife outside, right? The maximum penalty for the first offense of possessing a knife will go from 12 to 18 months. Okay, for possessing a knife, a pocket knife. What if you're and people don't think about predicaments they're in where they could use one, right? Especially one to protect yourself from somebody else. How about if you're out there and you're told you can't have a knife, and then a man jumps on your back and tries to go, old country on you, right? Tries to commit an act on you that you don't want. You don't have the right to protect yourself. People go, well, what are the odds of that? Until it happens, right? Until it happens. They never talk about these stories of people who actually are carrying out in public and nobody knows they're carrying because they're concealed carries and they're just carrying to protect themselves or their family. And somebody who is concealed carry actually saves somebody else from a crime or prevents a crime from happening because they have a concealed carry on, right? They just want you to hear these stories about how bad and dangerous it is. And now we're at a point where they're convincing civilians, and this shows you how panicked they are because they're pushing forward so hard, that they're not happy enough in Australia with the fact that they have everybody's guns. Nobody has guns in Australia. It's not enough for them there that they need these knife laws. Why? Because of all the tyrannical crap that went down during the outbreak. How much stuff went on in Australia? Maybe more than any other country other than China, where the civilians were realizing, whoa, they're locking us up. They're not letting us leave our home. They're taking our jobs away. They're not letting us leave or enter the country unless we have this in our bodies, et cetera, et cetera. People got suspicious. The government said, you know what? Too many people, we see that the data showing us like 75% of the people are complaining. That's way too many. Now we're going to go after their knives too. So what are you going to be left with? Your fists, right? Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, until they decide to cut your hand off or put the mark inside of it. And when that happens, you'll want to cut your own hand off, right? So this is what we're seeing going on around the world. The same type, you should see stories like that these stories that we're hearing with these knife stabbings. And you should think of the same thing in America, right? Think of the same exact stories. False flags being created so that the government could come in and take away your rights. So you won't be able to own knives. You won't be able to own guns. You won't be able to fart without them telling you can or can't. And this is what they ultimately want. And civilians are just caught up in believing these stories that they continue to formulate and put out there. So while we hear these stories in America week in, week out, when are we going to do something about it? When are we going to do something about it? Keep in mind the stories you're hearing in other countries where they're way past that stage. They're at a stage now where they don't even want you to own a pocket knife. God forbid you have a pocket knife on you and something happens with you're in your car, you get stranded out in the middle of nowhere on the side of the road in the middle of the night. You ain't got nothing on you, right, to protect you. Maybe you need a pocket knife. You're stuck out in the survival situation, huh? What if you're out camping? Can't have a pocket knife? You might need to use the pocket knife. Maybe you're going to make a nice little fire, right? You need some tinder to start the fire. Oh, you can't have that on you. It's too dangerous, right? And then keep in mind as well the stories we keep hearing in America about parents getting prosecuted because their children are acting out events at schools. Of course, these are all formulated too, right? If you haven't heard, there's stories of children who went and do these false flag events. Okay, their parents owned weapons in the home and the kids got access to them. So now the parents are being held accountable and going to prison for a long period of time, right? This is what we're seeing a tyrannical government do. It doesn't matter your skin color. It doesn't matter what political affiliation you are. It doesn't matter if you're pro-life, pro-choice. It doesn't matter if you're straight or gay. What matters is human rights. And if the government has these rights and you don't think the government's going to bully you and come to your door and force things on you that you don't want? That's exactly what this is going to lead to. And it's going to get to a point where you're going to cut a sandwich or go to cut a sandwich in your home. Of course, it'll be a bug sandwich because you won't be able to cut meat because you won't own meat. And you're going to say, I don't have a knife in the house. And the government's going to go, who cares? You don't need a knife. Use your fingers to break the bread. And these people go, oh, they're right. It's better to feel safe and not have a knife in my home because somebody could break into my home and take my own knife and hurt me. We need to get them out of public circulation. But of course, the government and all the people protecting the government officials and all the police officers who are in the Fraternal Order of Freemasonry, all of these people, they can have the guns and the knives and we won't. And they'll protect us because they're proving that they really have our best interest in mind and they really want to protect us. Huh? Snap out of it. If you're somebody out there and you're falling for this stuff, how do you not see it yet? How do you not see it? The most psychotic people in the world are in power. By design, they've put themselves in power to remove your rights and to literally start bullying you into submission. And every single story is gaslighting you into giving up your rights. Well, nobody questions these guys like Trudeau, et cetera, who are walking around with Secret Service and security guards who are all armed. They don't want you armed. And they say, because we're not a threat to society, but you are, right? Until you don't have these rights anymore, till they come to your door and confiscate your rights and take your guns out of your home and your knives out of your home. And then they go, oh yeah, you probably shouldn't have trusted us. Or till that light bulb goes off in your head and you say, what have we done? They're going to go, oopsies, too late. I thank everybody for being here. I hope you're all doing well. God bless you as always and your families.